welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. This time it's your single host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, but we have a very special guest who's on here quite often. I mean, it's one of those special appearances when you've been here so many times. It may not be a surprise to anyone, but our pal all the way from Florida, it's Benny Scala from Dan and Benny in the Ring. So thank you so much for again being a last second substitution for Mike Leno, although I'll do the obligatory Mike Leno thing, and I'll ask you to recall your memories of the 1963 Battle Royale at the Cow Palace with George Shire, and we can also talk roller derby extensively.
Now you're talking roller derby. Yep, I went to the one and only time I went to Madison Square Garden for a sporting event was, I think it was March 26, 1970. It was Palm Sunday. It was the San Francisco Bay Bombers against the Midwest Pioneers. And at that time, they set an indoor record for roller derby attendance. It was like 18,000 at the Garden. I was only at the Garden, believe it or not, twice in my life. Once for that. 4 years later, went to see Elton John.
Nice. It is interesting that roller derby and wrestling were really linked for a long time. That it was basically the same audience. You had the people that loved wrestling would then go on to watch roller derby. We used to have it here in the Bay Area. It would be roller derby and then wrestling on TV.
So let me ask you though, because Charlie O'Connell, what was he out there? Was he like another Mickey Mantle, like a Ray Stevens? Was he an icon?
No, we had. Well, first of all, you're talking about 1970. I was 3 years old, so I didn't really attach my mind to wrestling. But I knew the Bay Bombers when they were a little bit older, and then a guy by the name of Icebox Thompson, who was big guy, like 300-pound guy. He joined All Pro Wrestling, and he was that's the wrestling link between me and roller derby.
Was he was in the derby and he actually morphed into being a wrestler?
Being a manager.
Oh man, okay.
And he's kind of the big personality here in the Bay Area that is still associated with roller derby. That goes back. I think we had one other guy who was a blocker who is pretty famous too, but I don't want to lose our audience here and get too far down the rabbit hole on roller derby. It's just that it was always interesting that they seem to go for the same audience, and then as we can bring up the whole saga with the Iron Sheik, it all changed, and wrestling went this way and roller derby went that way, and the two have never intersected. They've never been able to successfully bring roller derby back, despite many attempts at trying to do so.
It was kind of like a fad, like the hula hoop. It was in and out throughout the course of history, but the last good run actually was probably in the 70s.
Yeah,
it's been gone for a long time.
Well, and there was the rollerball movie, that also kicked up the popularity of it and made people really interested.
It was a lot of fun, though. I mean, you had men and women alternating, and I mean, it was an actual, there was actual rules. Of course, they got broken all the time, but
exactly. It was like a lucha match. You really had no idea, A, what was going on, and B, who actually won. Except somebody would raise their hand at the end, and you'd go, "Oh, okay, looks like Team XYZ won."
I might be wrong, but I believe that Walt Harris, who was the roller derby announcer, also announced wrestling in San Francisco in the 70s.
Yeah, Walt Harris. Yes,
okay.
That's the name that did survive and cross over pretty effectively. And yes, Walt Harris did a lot of announcing on Bay Area wrestling. The Bay Area wrestling, the one that was before. And when I was a kid, that's what we used to watch was BAW, which was really like kind of almost a minor league of AWA. They really borrowed heavily from the AWA town. We didn't bring as many NWA and even that time WWF folks. We didn't have very many WWF matches here in the Bay Area. They were more in Los Angeles.
Okay.
big events, and we just wound up getting the AWA. So I got a lot of Steve Regal versus Buck Zumhoff.
You read my mind. I knew you were going to say Rock and Roll Buck Zumhoff.
Yes, God curse his soul. Yes.
Yeah, he didn't. Well, I mean, he's still around, but I mean, he didn't have a very good ending.
I'm a little surprised that Dark Side of the Ring hasn't done Buck Zumhoff.
Right. That's a perfect topic.
Expose, and how many years he really played the face when he was one of the most heelish of heel people in real life. It's kind of weird. I mean,
isn't it funny how that works, right? I mean,
yeah, Steve Regal was quote unquote the bad guy, in those Buck Zumhoff, Steve Regal matches, and that was the light heavyweight title in the AWA, and it was really just the Buck Zumhoff versus Steve Regal title. I mean, those two fought each other like every other week for the title, and it would change hands like 50 times.
It was like the now I'm probably going before your time. The the little women, midget women. All I had was Darling Dagmar and Diamond Lil. I think Diamond Lil actually lived with Moolah and helped train the women wrestlers at Moolah's camp in South Carolina. But they wrestled all over the country. There was it was always just them. They must have wrestled each other 1,000 times.
But it kind of reminds me of the fact that the light heavyweight title or the junior heavyweight championship, however you want to call it, that is something that just never sticks. Wrestling gets excited and introduces a cruiserweight title, and then for whatever reason, one of the big problems I think is that wrestling has a hard time determining weight classes. So when you have someone win the cruiserweight title or the junior heavyweight title, they wind up facing guys who are big enough to warrant the heavyweight title fight, and so you wind up having cruiserweights taking on heavyweights for the cruiserweight title, and eventually it goes away because they don't have enough small guys to make up a cruiserweight championship. That's viable.
But back and looks, I think the NWA was really the only organization, because back in the 50s you had, and I'm really going back in history though, you had Dory Funk Sr. was the world junior heavyweight champion, Angelo Savoldi 4 or 5 times, Wild Red Berry, who later became a manager, and then of course Danny Hodge, who was a legend.
I met Wild Red Berry a long time ago.
And a lot of people.
He's a big guy. He's a huge guy.
Well, and everybody remembers him as a manager back in the 60s, but he was really a very good wrestler back in the 50s. And you had Danny Hodge, and then at the end you had Hiro Matsuda, and the NWA, the light junior heavyweight championship, was a big deal. But that kind of phased out probably around 1980 or so, and since then you really haven't seen it come. Not in full force.
I would call that one of 2 ephemeral championships. The other ephemeral championship would be the 6-man tag title.
Right.
They just, no federation has ever grabbed onto and really made a big deal. Even though for a while the NWA had some of, I thought, really exciting 6-man combos. From either you had 3 out of the 4 horsemen wrestling, usually it would be Tully Blanchard and the Andersons.
Right, Arn and Ole maybe.
Yeah. Or you would have, there was the championship that was held by Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors. If you ask me, that might be one of the toughest 3-man combinations you could get. And then, of course, the truly the original 6-man tag team built from scratch, and that's the Freebirds, the fabulous Freebirds. They were made to be the 6-man tag team. And you had the Russians too, that were pretty hard to beat. When you had Ivan Koloff and
Crusher Khrushchev,
Barry Darso,
one of his 18
characters, yes, and Nikita Koloff,
right,
in the early days. That was a team that I was really wowed with when those three guys went on their rampage and took over the NWA by storm, and they generated so much heat.
But that was a good championship. I mean, those were good matches.
Right? Yeah. No. And I'm surprised no other Fed, especially one like AEW that just has wrestlers coming out of their ears, literally. I mean, they're bursting at the seams with wrestlers. They wouldn't adopt a 6-man tag title and start trying to use up wrestlers by having them involved in 6-man matches rather than what was weird was as the 6-man match went away, which is something I liked. The birth of something that I hated came in, and I got to tell you, there's only one match when it's announced, type of match when it's announced, that I roll my eyes at and go, I'm not looking forward to it. Is there a match, by the way, that just like they'll say a certain match type and you'll just go, oh my god, that's going to be crap?
No, not really. I'm interested in what you have to say.
I hate 3-way dances.
Okay, yeah. So you're talking more of the modern stuff? Yes. Absolutely. I agree with you.
I don't know if there's one that I've seen that I really, really like. I mean, that I love the way that, let's say a cage match or a dog collar match or even, God forsake. Although I will say maybe second place on that list is the old WWF bull rope matches where you had to drag the guy to the 4 corners and touch all 4 corners. I love the bull rope being involved, but I like the old NWA thing, which is they put the bell on it and then you just beat the other guy senseless. There's no, stipulations on, you don't have to drag the guy to the 4 corners.
Did they in San Francisco, because this is one thing that the WWE never did, the brass knuckles. A lot of territories use the brass knuckles.
No, they did not. And we never had coal miners' glove matches either.
No.
Well, you would imagine in San Francisco, the coal miners' glove wouldn't make much sense. Although they could call it the gold miners' glove if they wanted to, and we still would have bought it. But no, in fact, really, when I was growing up, specialty matches almost never happened here in the Bay Area. If we got a cage match, it was a huge deal, and they would usually sell out. In fact, in one of the biggest AWA matches I ever went to was a card that featured Sergeant Slaughter and the Road War, Sergeant Slaughter and Kurt and Larry Hennig. Talk about a 6-man tag team.
Wow.
Versus the Road Warriors and Precious Paul Ellering.
Okay.
In a cage. And that was the second bloodiest match that I've ever seen. The one that went before it, which was Crusher Jerry Blackwell against Sheik Adnan Al-KC, was the bloodiest match I ever saw in person. Sheik Adnan had one of those wrist wraps that was all wrapped up, and of course, as soon as he got in the cage, he had a foreign object in it. And so it was one of those like old school 30-minute matches where you have Crusher Blackwell, for God's sakes. The guy had, a road map on his forehead. He just basically Sheik Adnan just hitting him in the forehead with a foreign object. Just Crusher Blackwell literally just, crimson masked all over the place. And then he got the foreign object away from Sheik Adnan. And then there was another 15 minutes of him hitting him on the forehead over and over and over again. And just the two of them were just covered in blood in the days before HIV and AIDS and all all that other stuff. Nobody in San Francisco seemed to really care, so we were all just amassed by. But the Sergeant Slaughter Road Warriors thing was pretty bloody too. I mean, Larry the Axe got cut, and Paul Ellering got cut up real bad, and he took the fall in that match. But that was about the biggest specialty match that we had. And then, to me, the 3-way dance is just so stilted. I just hate the booking of there's never been a 3-way match to me.
No, because you have one guy sitting around waiting for the other two guys to do something before it doesn't work. I agree with you.
Yeah, I hate it. They usually take a minor bump roll outside the ring.
And they're out there for about 3 minutes, which
they're writing like a novel or something
right.
on the side. They're sitting there handwriting out a novel. I mean, you're wondering, like, you know, in a regular wrestling match, one guy would not spend 5 or 6 minutes outside the ring doing nothing.
Right.
You know, you wouldn't have that. Even the slowest referee counting, sorry, Tom Caster, you know, even the slowest wrestling referee would take that much time to count somebody out. And and then of course what will happen is that two guys in the ring will battle each other absolutely senseless. You'll have one guy on top of the other one, and it'll be a 1, a 2, and then the guy from the outside will come in, break it up, and one other wrestler will then roll out and take a 5-minute blow. And then you'll have the other two fighting. And then
right.
then the three will all get in the ring at the very end to like finish it all off. But it's just the booking has never been right with me.
No.
I would never in my life as a promoter book a 3-way match. I know it's so popular, and I don't understand why it is. I don't understand why it is.
I tell you what, like to me, there's a number of things that from our past that really have gone by the wayside. You know, one is truly the emphasis on tag team wrestling. The other one is lack of color, although AEW does it. But one of the things that I miss is the gimmick matches, like, you know, the loser leaves town match, or you know, a hair versus hair match.
Or unmasking, or an unmasking,
or an unmasking, or you know, I remember Bruno had the Sicilian stretcher match, which, like, was there a piece of of Sicilian pizza on the stretcher? Like, how did that stretcher become Sicilian? Like,
because in Genoa they just, you know, throw you on the streets,
okay,
and drag you by your heels.
Right.
They don't have the nicety of the Sicilians to actually put you on a stretcher.
Right.
And hey, anyone from Genoa, no emails about how cool. I don't want any.
But I mean, like, all those things, you know, even like the use of managers, like we were talking about Wild Red Berry, and, you know, back in the day in WWF, you had Bobby Davis, who managed Buddy Rogers. You had Homer Odell, who managed Bull Ramos, and I think Homer Odell wrestled in the Mid-Atlantic for years after that. You had, you know, Red Berry. Then you had Lou Albano. You had Fred Blassie. Like, managers, with the exception of Paul Heyman in WWE, you really don't have much in the way of managers.
The WWE dabbles in it. You know, they had the Indian folks had, you know, a manager, and then you had Lashley bring in
with MVP, right?
Yeah, but they dabble in it. They kind of, like, you know, have them in there once or twice. They don't really commit to it, and it's really, you know, what the managerial position for the most part was one of two types of guys. You had the ex-wrestler, you know, who really couldn't fight anymore, but could still be a viable manager and take some bumps. And then you had, you know, the small, spindly guy who obviously would never, ever be involved as a wrestler, but somehow, you know, can be the brains of the thing, like
Jimmy Hart, maybe, or
Jimmy Hart, or Cornette,
Downtown Bruno, Harvey
Whippleman, Harvey Whippleman, exactly. So you had those two types, you know, and the WWE seems to not, and you don't even see it in AEW, doesn't seem to really want to involve either of those two types. They don't really have a lot of old ex-wrestlers that are involved in the show, you know, and you don't have any people who are not already, like, talent that are already in there, you know, as you said, other than Paul Heyman, who's kind of got, you know, I mean, he's so involved in the storylines of everything. You might as well have him there just so he can be a narrator. And really, I mean, I think he's extended the career of Brock Lesnar by about 4 or 5 years.
Probably.
If Lesnar had to somehow survive on his own without Paul Heyman taking him to the ring and doing the whole Brock Lesnar,
my client.
Yeah, if he hadn't done that and been the voice for Brock, I mean, we'd probably have. Brock probably would be where Braun Strowman is.
But
today.
that was, I mean, back in the day, that was the whole deal, was that the manager, like, I remember Crusher Verdue. I don't know if he ever wrestled by you. I think his real name was Oscar Verdue. And the guy had the personality of a lampshade. Couldn't cut a promo if somebody held a loaded gun to his head. But you had Lou Albano take up the slack. Even Ivan Koloff, you had Albano, Blassie. I mean they had the heels were the ones who couldn't cut the promos, and they paired them up with a heel manager, and it worked.
And I loved it. That's why that's what Buddy Sotelo was all about.
Exactly. There you go.
That very thing. And it gave the wrestler who wasn't good on the mic confidence that he didn't have to carry an interview, or it could, you could give him spots where he could, growl on the mic, say, "I'm gonna get you," fill in the blank, "when I get you in the ring next week," and then you can set him up with like quotes so that he only has to talk in little bite-sized segments that generally people who are shy on the mic. That's easier to do. And, that is one thing I think a lot of people do not understand, is that there's a large number of wrestlers, both past and present, that are not comfortable on the mic. You go you're showing up in your swimsuit in the middle of the ring of, thousands of people, and you're able to do all those things in the ring, but then a mic is put in your face and you can't say anything. People don't really understand that those are two very different skills.
Absolutely.
And that, it being a good mic worker, I mean, there are obviously wrestlers who are as great on the mic as they are in the ring, like a Piper, like a Flair, and so forth. But there's a lot of guys like Braun Strowman and Brock Lesnar.
Bobby Eaton back in the day.
Yeah, he didn't
phenomenal wrestler, but he couldn't talk.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, here in the Bay Area, we have guys like Paul Isadora, who's 7'1" and super scary in the ring, but just can't. He has kind of a soft voice and doesn't really scare you when he talks. And so I put a mask on him and made him Mr. Massacre. And he scared the hell out of people. And again, he didn't have to talk at all. And what I loved, and I said it in the Mark Smith documentary. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that yet, where yours truly is a decent part of the movie itself.
Oh no, I got to check that
documentary of it. I'll have to send you the link for that. But the whole idea of putting a mask on him and getting him to instead use pantomime as a way of communicating, as opposed to, getting on the mic and saying stuff, is a powerful thing and something that is really lost on today's wrestlers.
Right.
Concept of body language as a way to send a message to an audience is something that wrestling used to be all about, even with guys who could go on the mic, as opposed to now, where guys are you see guys during an interview, and by and large, a lot of them are very stiff, very static, do not get worked up and pace back and forth.
Well, and the other difference too is they're reading a script by and large, where back in the day, like a Piper, you probably gave Piper, well, I need you to cover this, this, and this, and you're on your own as far as how you want to cover it, and it was all impromptu.
Yeah, and the WWE goes the other way. They hand you a 40-page manual filled with every word that you can't possibly say during a promo.
But then it's no longer you. It's really you're becoming the creative writer. It's not your own personality.
Well, and if you know that you have this giant sword of Damocles hanging over your head, that if you say the word title, or if you say the word, if you say referee, it's amazing. But have you ever seen that list of all the things you can't say in the WWE? It's first of all, George Orwell gives Vince McMahon a high five. Says, "Thank you. You are the living embodiment of everything that I dreamed of."
You proved me right.
In 1984, you're absolutely the. Yes, you're the only thing that George Orwell would be disappointed with is that Vince McMahon doesn't actually run a country right now.
Right.
Although Saudi Arabia is pretty damn close. You know,
Yeah.
no wonder why Vince and the Saudis were so close. By the way, did that surprise you at all that the Saudis didn't wind up buying the WWE and the WWE kind of merged with the MMA?
Yeah, and not that I follow it that closely, but my understanding was like they were offering huge amounts of money, way more than anybody else. So I was very surprised he didn't go that way.
Yeah, well, I do think that in the end, if they had done that, it would have killed the brand. Because I mean, I know I can tolerate so much, but I can't necessarily tolerate the WWE being owned by Saudi Arabia. You know,
Right.
And I don't and I've never watched any of the pay-per-views that went on in Saudi Arabia. You know, I'm not I haven't forgiven Saudi Arabia for 9/11. I
Right.
don't think we've ever, as a country, ever really dealt with Saudi Arabia because we love their gasoline so much.
Sure.
And we basically have said, you know, as long as you keep our cars running, you can bomb whatever you want, or you can plan to bomb whatever you want. We'll just go attack another country, and that'll satisfy us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad he didn't do it. I'm just kind of surprised that he didn't do it.
Yeah, but so yeah, you know, Vince McMahon stays away from being the ultimate heel in that sense, but he still, you know, has managed to keep himself in the forefront in recent, you know, months. I when he came back, I thought, you know, maybe there'd be a chance that he'd just do it just so that he could appear at WrestleMania, you know, rub everyone's face in it, and then slink back into the darkness. But I think, you know, now that he's back, I think he just, until he dies, he's probably just not going to ever leave the spotlight of the WWE. He doesn't want, you know, especially because he got rid of all the people that Triple H put in place during the time he was gone. I think that Vince is like, you know what, WWE is always going to be mine. I'll always be the Colonel Sanders of this company.
I to be honest, I really don't. I barely. If I'm on YouTube and I see, you know, say it's Monday night and it's like 10 o'clock and there's a highlight and it looks interesting, I'll watch it for like 10 minutes. But that's all I can do is about 10 minutes at a time. I've kind of followed the Bloodline storyline, and that actually, to me, was fairly entertaining. But other than that, I just, you know, I'll go back and watch a Memphis Wrestling from 1980, or even the old WWF, and watch a Ken Patera or a Superstar Billy Graham promo. Now there's an example of, you know, you had the Grand Wizard and Superstar could, I mean, that guy could talk. So that was an interesting combination, but they made it work somehow.
Absolutely, because they fed off of each other.
Right.
You know, they would the Grand Wizard would, you know, set up Superstar for those kind of lines, and Superstar would then be able to carry it over, and then he'd give it back to the Grand Wizard. The Grand Wizard was someone that I was always really impressed with, because Ernie Roth never took a bump, and he was the first manager I could remember that wasn't an ex-wrestler, that you never thought at any point in time could ever physically do anything to any wrestler and have any effect. You know, and he never took any bumps. I mean,
I don't know if he did or not when he was with the Sheik as Abdullah Farouk in Detroit, Big Time Wrestling. I don't think he did either, though. I don't think he ever did.
And to think of that is like unthinkable. You know, to think of having a manager other than right now, like Paul Heyman, obviously couldn't take a bump, and
not anymore. He couldn't. No,
and he shouldn't.
No.
You know, and then we've also seen with Shane McMahon, you know, at the last WrestleMania, tearing out his quad by doing a leapfrog.
Right.
You know, he said, and what's scary is that Shane and I are almost the same age, and just the thought of like doing some of the physical things that he's done, you know, in the ring, and thinking to myself, well, first of all, I've managed to break my shoulder tripping over my kid's scooter. So like the thought of like doing anything ring based at all, is
Well,
scary as all hell.
I spent because I am the commish of Boogie's Wrestling Camp, BWC, and that's where I spent my day today. And I mean, I was literally 5 minutes from 5 minutes, 5 feet from ringside, and I mean those chops. I mean, they hurt my chest, and I'm thinking like, man, as much as I would love to do something like that, I mean, those days are long past for me.
Yeah, in fact, why don't you tell the listeners about Boogie's Wrestling Camp? There's a lot of people that don't know all about it. So
Okay, my pleasure. So Boogie's Wrestling Camp is owned by Jimmy Valiant, WWE Hall of Famer, class of 1996. It's located in Shawsville, Virginia. Now, where's Shawsville, Virginia? Just if you go to Google Maps, you just type in middle of nowhere, and then when you get there, drive another 50 miles and you hit Shawsville.
From Florida, how long does it take for you to get up there?
Yeah, I'm actually here for a little bit. I'm hanging out in Virginia for a little bit, but from Florida, it's about an 11-hour drive, 700 miles.
Wow,
it's a hike, but it's Jimmy opened it, I believe, in 1991. He's had 30 graduating classes, and he charges the same rate that he did 30 years ago when he opened the camp. And it's got every Sunday they have matches. They do they do drills. It's just a great place. They all, if you were there, you have to be there to witness it. But the way they all support each other, and they all absolutely love Jimmy. It's just a very, you would think you were anywhere but a wrestling camp. Well, except when you watch the action in the ring, then it's a whole different story. But then they have like today was I can't think of the name of it now. Every 2 weeks they have a TV taping, and they have a card. And today they had the Baron Von. It's Boogie's Beach Bonanza. I was thinking Benny's birthday blowout. I couldn't get him to rename it because my birthday was yesterday. But
yes, and happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
What a crappy birthday present this is to have to do my show.
No, it's a pleasure. But we kicked off the Baron Von Raschke tournament today. We got to do that for the BWC International Championship. It's going to be a brand new championship. So there were 4 matches today, and then July 9th at Star Spangled SmackDown will be the semifinals, and then Heat Wave on July 23rd. So they these kids and this is not Jimmy. This is all they have an executive producers, Yellowman and Big H, and they do all the storylines. I'm kind of getting involved with the storylines now, but they do all this stuff. They arrange all the matches and everything, and it's a great place, a lot of fun.
Nice. So that's good that you're doing some storyline work. Have you ever done anything with an independent fed before like this?
Absolutely nothing. No, this is all brand new, and I actually have to. It's really funny that getting behind the microphone doing a podcast, I don't really give it much thought, but having a mic in your hands in the ring with a camera pointed at you, it's a whole different ball game. And to be honest, I'm still adjusting to it. So I had to cut a promo today. Fortunately, I had some notes that I had typed out, but it gives you all that much more appreciation for a wrestler who can cut a promo like off the top of their head.
And yet, those are the best promos. I will say, having done a number of promos myself, the ones that I ultra rehearsed and tried really hard to have every word scripted out were disasters.
Right.
Those ones were the ones where right as soon as the camera shows, you're like, ugh,
right.
Ugh, ugh. It's the ones where you see something in the audience or something, with the wrestler himself. He may say something back to you, or she may say something back to you, and then all of a sudden that gets you triggered, and you're like, oh, I can go off of that, and you're able to move that forwards, and you're not worried about it. It's the hardest ones were the ones where I knew I had to say something specific, and I had to work my way over to that specific point. Guy being in a battle royale, guy having a title shot, that kind of thing, and trying to work my way into that versus just being an insult comedian and insult the other wrestler enough till I finally like get to the point. And then, oh yeah, and there's a title match. But like the Bobby Heenan thing. Bobby Heenan just had shtick running out. It was borscht belt comedy.
Exactly.
That was all just stuff, corny jokes that like your great uncle would tell you, or your uncle would tell you when you were growing up. Just really stupid stuff like this guy. This guy is so stupid they had to stay up all night to pass a blood test, studying for a blood test, like Ernie Ladd would say about Andre the Giant. That he had these jokes that had nothing to do with the wrestler itself, but you knew he was waiting all week to throw them out there and to just throw, string these like five or six.
Yeah, he had a ton of them. It's like Rodney Dangerfield. I remember one time I watched Rodney Dangerfield on the Tonight Show, and I think in 3 minutes he told about 20 jokes. I counted them, just one after the other, boom, but I mean very spontaneous, and that's how Bobby Heenan was. So you're right. I think the spontaneity makes it that much better.
Yeah, and that you have this shtick already in mind. Like for instance, when I would announce with my friend JJ, who I hope to get on here in a couple of weeks, when we would do the CCW broadcast for Xfinity, for Comcast cable, I would have phrases that I would say I'd have to get in during the broadcast. So I was always working my way around to them. Like one of my favorite quotes is, "He's synonymous with being anonymous."
I like that.
Another one would be, "This guy isn't even a household name in his own home." Yeah, exactly. Little chuckle things like that.
My favorite is often imitated, never duplicated. But then they would say, often constipated, never imitated.
Yes, Fiverr, and this joke brought to you by FiberCon.
Right.
Metamucil. And speaking of, we did talk a little bit about superstar Billy Graham being gone. He was one of the great promo people, but one of the other great promo givers of all time died just even more recently, and that was the Iron Sheik. And I hadn't had you on since the Iron Sheik died, and I would love to get your thoughts and opinions about the passing of the Iron Sheik.
The guy was larger than life, and I don't think he really gets his just due in the history of wrestling, because he was very instrumental in segueing from the old school with Bob Backlund into the new era with Hulk Hogan. I don't know that anybody really would have been a better choice. And I still don't know to this day. I mean, there's been a lot of argument about it that Vern Gagne offered Sheik $100,000 to break Hogan's leg when they faced each other at the Garden for the title. But if it's true, and Sheik turned him down, and I do believe, even though he was a heel, that he had a lot of integrity. The real Hossein Vaziri, I think his name was. Had a lot of integrity and was really a class person. I know Bruno Sammartino, who's my lifelong hero, had all the respect in the world for Sheik, because there was an incident in Pittsburgh where I think a few of the Steelers went backstage into the locker room, and they called Bruno a washed-up old man, and Bruno said something to the effect like, "I'm not washed up enough that I can't take care of you guys." But it was like 3 or 4 on 1, and Sheik was in the shower and heard the whole thing and came out, and him and Bruno apparently cleaned house.
Wow.
So that's the kind of guy he was.
That story, but it is.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, and the thing about, the Iron Sheik is he gets mentioned a lot about, the short stint that he had as a WWF champion, but they don't really talk about his tag team championship with Nikolai Volkov.
Nikolai, yeah.
And Nikolai, he and Nikolai as a tag team is underrated for one of the best tag teams of all time. They fought a lot of matches. When we were talking about how the WWE and tag team wrestling in general has really sort of taken a back seat. And you look at the guys that Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik were able to take on, and they fought the Hart Foundation, they fought the British Bulldogs, they fought Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo, they fought the Killer Bees, they fought. Even for a very short time, the Freebirds were in the WWF at the same time as Nikolai Volkov and Iron Sheik, I believe. As a tag team. They fought, one of the hottest matches that I ever saw, because the Sergeant Slaughter Iron Sheik boot camp match that happened here in Oakland at the Oakland Coliseum was one of the few non-WrestleMania or pay-per-view events that sold out when I was a kid. So I didn't get to see that match, and I was so disappointed because everybody talked about what an incredible match that was. But then they had the debut of the Junkyard Dog, and he tagged with Sergeant Slaughter against Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik. And I went to that match, and that was a sellout as well.
Wow.
And that crowd went berserk when Sergeant Slaughter and Junkyard Dog came down to ringside. Well, first of all, Nikolai Volkov was already singing, his Russian national anthem. And I don't know if you remember, but Junkyard Dog's theme was another one, Bites the Dust.
Yes.
When he started out. So just as Nikolai Volkov is going, oh, then it goes, dun dun dun.
Perfect timing.
And just the raw, crazy energy, because we'd all heard so much about the Junkyard Dog. And I think that was the first time the Junkyard Dog had appeared in the Bay Area. And not making racial comments, but Oakland is a more, African American centered area than San Francisco. And the crowd was mostly black, and they went just about as just total nuts as actually maybe I'm talking about like John Cena level nuts, like Hulk Hogan at the prime part of his championship kind of nuts, Ric Flair in a WCW match kind of nuts. I mean, people went just absolutely berserk, but I don't think that they would have had that intensity without having someone credible on the other side, like Nikolai Volkov and like the Iron Sheik, that could really get in there and be believable in the ring as viable enemies. Like, for instance, when they brought Boris Zukov in to face Sergeant Slaughter, that was not nearly the kind of pop or intensity that you had when Sergeant Slaughter faced Nikolai Volkov, when Sergeant Slaughter faced the Iron Sheik. People really wanted to see the Iron Sheik get his ass beat. People really were upset at the Iron Sheik, legitimately, and Nikolai Volkov. And it was so the rubbing into our faces, of how these anti-American types can.
And that's funny, because at camp today, one of the things I was talking about to some of the kids was that back in the day, if you a German, a Russian, or a Japanese, automatically a heel, and they got whoever it was got pretty much instant heat from the crowd just because of their ethnicity. I think that, and I could be wrong, but the Iron Sheik and Nikolai were one of the last of the ethnic teams that got true heat.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could say the Quebecers as Canadians.
Yes.
Were maybe that last real vestiges of that. And maybe you could argue and say some of the Lucha teams that we have now, the Lucha Express or so forth, might be borrowing from that, but it isn't. You wouldn't have fans coming in there and saying, we hate the Lucha Underground because they're Mexican, or they're from South America.
Right.
You wouldn't have people visibly or audibly voicing that, as opposed to back in the day where, people would when Tito Santana would come into the ring, people would fly Mexican flags in the audience. When Salvatore Bellomo would get in there with his green and white and red trunks, and people would, be thrilled. Italian Americans would be thrilled to root for Paul Roma, or when he was the Italian Stallion,
sure,
type person. Yeah, it's that emphasis on being proud or being anti nationalities or ethnicities is something that, obviously we're in an age where that's so politically incorrect, and wrestling is really too afraid to be politically incorrect now. I just think it can't happen, even with Vince and his penchant for wanting to be politically incorrect. I don't think he has the guts to really do it.
No, there's too much money on the line.
Yeah, we're not going to, and now he's, especially as a publicly held company,
right?
And he knows that if he made a real big mistake, people could sell the stock tomorrow and destroy his company. If the public didn't like something of his, when it was all something that he just owned, I think he felt he had the freedom to just do whatever he wanted. And if people don't want to watch, they're not going to watch, but somehow they're still going to wind up watching. It's interesting to see how that demographic has shifted. And you still have to work wrestling in the kind of environment where you want to get people upset. You want to get them to feel like there's something at stake and that there are bad guys out there. But how do you do that without the cheap heat of either, being nationalistic or drawing lines on ethnic lines or something, again, you don't have the Indian wrestler anymore. That used to be a total staple of every Fed, whether it was the Young Bloods, or whether it was Tatanka,
Chief J,
or Jay Strongbow, or the Renegade Warriors. You usually had someone as the Native American, really pushing the Native American cause. And now, I can't think of any quote unquote Native American, Indian wrestler, other than the actual folks from India, the country, involved.
And, part of my problem with wrestling is that, and I always mention this gentleman's name, is Howard Jerome, who was in the movie 350 Days, Evans movie. And the one line that he came up with the one line that I remember was that there's a fundamental longing in the human heart to see good triumph over evil. And I don't think that's really, the storylines now are so blurred, the lines are blurred, that, you have people cheering heels and booing baby faces. And that never happened. I don't think anybody ever booed Bruno Sammartino at Madison Square Garden or cheered George Steele, on the other side.
Not until George Steele became the
then he became goofy,
when he
got a crush on Elizabeth,
when he had the little stuffed animal named Mine.
He probably made more money with Mine than he did in his previous 20 years of wrestling, though.
Sure, but you're right. That's one of the reasons why I always loved wrestling, having a masked wrestler as one of the guys that I managed, because I knew they would automatically be heel, just because he was a big bodyguard type that would allow me to be the yappy little. I don't know if you remember in Warner Brothers cartoons, there used to be this big bulldog,
Yes, and the little yappy dog
dog that would run around and say, go get him, Butch. Go get him, Butch. He would do all the talking. He would get in all the trouble, and the big bulldog would have to do all the
heavy lifting,
and the heavy work. And I always loved that, because I think that is something that generates heat without being ethnic, without being racial or blue, working blue at all. People hate to see the little wimpy guy cashing checks that the butt of the big bruiser has to pay for. and that you make him do all the heavy work and the bodyguard work, and meanwhile you're just running around in the background, kind of scrimping around and setting fires, making him put out all the fires. That's what I'm
Sure.
telling. I'm working with a guy, out here in California. I'm working with a manager. He was on last week, Ryan Devine, giving him the pointers of what made me a good manager. And
Sure.
in fact, I'm always interested in like what supplemental materials I can give to him as assignments for him to watch. I've already made him watch. As a manager, I made him watch I'm From Hollywood. So the whole Andy Kaufman story, the one that he put together. And then I also had him watch Mommy Dearest. I said, if you really want to get yourself into character, watch Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest. That's the way a professional manager should act and talk, is the way that Joan Crawford acts in Mommy Dearest. Thought that was like a perfect thing there for, and I've had him watch The Peanut Butter Falcon. I've had him watch
I have to thank you, because you turned me on to that. Was a great. I love that movie. That was a good movie.
Really? And you hadn't seen it before I told
Never,
you?
nope. I had not until you mentioned it to me.
Wow. Yeah, it's very touching.
It is. It really is.
It really is. It could have been exploitative and obnoxious in its message, and instead it turns completely and shows you such a human side of wrestling that you didn't think you'd see when you first start watching it.
Right.
And I but I was just wondering if you had anything that you would recommend my managerial friend to check out that would help beef him up. I had him, watch guys like Dean Douglas, and Shane Douglas, and when he was doing his promos, as a great promo cutter.
That was an angle that really never got to play out like it should have, and that's a shame, because I was really invested in that angle.
Yeah, it was great on the mic.
Yes, absolutely.
The WWE really squandered, I think, a great mic worker. And then, of course, Chris Jericho. He's always got some of the best promos out there. Even now with Ring of Honor and AEW, and he's getting close to the end of his lifeline. Although he strikes me as one of those guys that just may wrestle into his 60s. Just because he can't get away from the profession, and it's so part of him, and the profession is so much part of what he does that it's I don't think he can just divorce himself from it and walk away.
I tell you what I would recommend is Jim Cornette feuding with Bill Watts in Mid-South.
That's a good one.
Some epic heel manager work.
Yeah, especially because the guy that I'm working with is kind of Jim Cornette, although he doesn't have that raw, like bursting out of him kind of energy that like Jimmy Hart. And
I was gonna mention Jimmy Hart, but yeah, so that wouldn't work then.
Right. I'm trying to. He's more of a plotting kind of behind the scenes sort of intellectual type. So I think he's more of a Paul Heyman sort of mixed with Andy Kaufman type thing, without the totally manic side of him.
Right.
I have to tweak him to get it, and what my friend JJ always said about Buddy Sotelo was, he said Buddy Sotelo is Russell Jackman, but he's Russell Jackman turned up to 11, and then you take the knob off. You don't ever go backwards. You just keep increasing the intensity every time.
I think that's when it works best, though. It's an extension of you, but it just amped up a bit.
But I always felt creating a construct character of things that I normally hate, and having people also hate them as well, gave me the extra energy to put into that character, as opposed to it being myself. I never thought that I could ever be Russell Jackman going to the ring and being managerial talent Russell Jackman. That would scare the hell out of me. And I think I'd never be able to do it. But when I can create a construct of all the things I hate in Buddy Sotelo and then come to the ring as Buddy Sotelo, I love it that people hate him because I hate him too. And I, he's everything that, in all the lawyers that I meet that I can't stand. Buddy Sotelo embodies all those things. So to have people then hate the thing that I, lumped into, and I wonder if that's the kind of thing that like Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik and everyone that's been a really successful, or Superstar Billy Graham, everyone that's been a really successful heel, I think they're able to separate who they are outside of the ring, deep inside, from the thing that they present at the ring that they also hate, or they would also hate if they were in the fans' position. I think that sort of thing is what really makes people really, like I think the Quebecers, the Rougeaus, saw, those S-eating Canadians that, bug Americans so much. And they poured their character into the Rougeaus to make them, when they were like, waving the American flag.
Little flags, yeah.
Yeah, and just
all American boys.
You can't stand that when Canadians do that. I bet you Americans hate that just as much. And that's what I think is great, is when you can find the thing that, you hate so much and share that with the crowd and they hate it so much. It gives you that energy to really put into that character to make them go over the top. And I'm not sure AEW has enough of that, and I sure don't think that the WWE has enough of that. Where people are really, like Finn Balor is a really good example. That like Finn Balor's character right now, I don't think Finn Balor really likes it. And I don't get the feeling that his demon character or whatever is something that he really is into. Therefore, it just sort of flops around and goes nowhere.
Right.
Whereas when Bray Wyatt was the Fiend, he really loved that character.
Sure.
He really wanted to go somewhere.
He embraced that.
He dropped the ball on it. But it was something that he was really into, and he was bringing it up to another level, and then they just kind of, I still don't really understand what happened with the Fiend or what.
Same here.
Why it disappeared. Somewhere down the line, Vince McMahon will die within our lifetime. I know it seems impossible, or maybe he'll have his head cut off and frozen like Ted Williams.
Cryogenics.
Yeah, but when he's finally gone, I think there'll be like maybe about a 5-year period where everyone will be too afraid because of lawsuits not to say anything. But it's going to be fascinating to hear like the real truth about Vince McMahon. Like when all these people come forward after Vince McMahon is gone.
All the NDAs, like when they can actually talk.
Yeah, when they're actually like over with, and people can actually like say, this is what really happened. I think there's going to be some really fascinating stories that we're all going to be like, okay, that's what we thought, but we didn't really know, And I haven't caught up with Dark Side of the Ring yet, but I want to see some of the episodes this year because I think this is the final season of it because the Vice TV I think is going to be off the air by the end of this year or maybe early next year. I think they were supposed to be bought out and they didn't get bought out, so. Now, then again, some other station may be smart enough to pick up Dark Side and keep it going. But I think Vice TV is unfortunately going to be on the way out. So in the meantime, we got a couple minutes left. I want to talk about my second place San Francisco Giants versus your New York Yankees and what kind of
third place and sinking rapidly New York Yankees.
Yes, and that Aaron Judge may have a torn toe ligament, might be out for the season. Whereas, look, the Giants weirdly missed out on some major talent in Correa and in Judge. And Judge, is the better team for it.
Right.
We're dredging up guys from the minors and guys like Patrick Bailey and Casey Schmidt and Matos, Benjamin Matos. They're all having huge contributions right now and have changed the team's fortune. Whereas, if we had signed these big free agents, we might kind of be, wondering what the hell's going on with ourselves. So
I mean, would your record be that much better with
it would be. It wouldn't be, because we wouldn't have these guys. We wouldn't have a future that we're looking at. With the Yankees, you guys are stuck with Aaron Judge, for what, like another 11 years or something?
No, I think it's was it 9 for 40 years, 40 million for 9 years, 360.
It's a lot to put in on a baseball player or any athlete, and expecting, and I do think he's going to help you guys, maybe in, up to years 3, 4, and 5. But I wonder how things are going to be, especially if he has to have surgery on his toe. What years 6, 7, 8, and 9 are going to be like for you?
Well, I always use Albert Pujols as an example. I think he was 9-year, $270 million. He never hit, and his lifetime average, I think when he left the Cardinals, was over 320. Never hit even close to 300 with the Angels. Went up with a career average under, of course, the guy still, he hit over 700 home runs. I think he's number 2 all time in RBIs. Great ball player, but he never replicated the kind of seasons he had with the Cardinals. And, for all that money they paid him. I think it's going to be the same thing with Judge. I just have this feeling. Yes, if he's healthy, he will hit 50 home runs and drive in 130 runs. But, last year he was healthy, but obviously not this year.
You don't even have the slightest temptation to hop over to the Tampa Bay Rays.
No.
Even though they're going to be 40 games over 500.
Yeah,
season's end.
I've been to that ballpark many times, and it's just, it doesn't feel like it's a baseball stadium. It's too quiet. I don't like the indoor baseball thing anyway, and I'm hoping that they build an outdoor stadium somewhere, because eventually they're going to lose the team if they don't, which would be a shame. But it's in a horrible location in St. Pete. It's very inconvenient. So I just really, I've never gotten into the Rays.
Maybe they could swap teams. Maybe the Oakland A's can go over to Tampa, and then Tampa can come over to Oakland, and they can. But it looks like Oakland's going to wind up in Las Vegas. What's your thought of that, by the way? Quickly.
So they'd be the first team to be in 4 different cities.
Yeah.
Philadelphia, Kansas City, Oakland, and then Las Vegas. They are, I checked today, so they're 20-60. If they were to replicate that, then they would tie the Mets for the most losses modern era.
Yes, and well deserved. The ownership has just completely abandoned the fans, and the fans can only do so much. The stadium is terrible, and it's the only existing multi-use stadium in America, that used to host football games, and now, yes, they're baseball only now, but the stadium was destroyed by Al Davis, so that they could never really be what it was before. And the whole stadium just is so old and falling apart, and they give no incentive for the fans to come. And when you have a team across the bay like the Giants that have, won 3 World Series recently, and, have a million times better park. I don't know. Have you ever been to Oracle Park?
No, have not.
One of these days, you do have to come west.
Yes, I will.
See Oracle Park. I will take you to a game to see the Giants, because I think you'll see the difference. But the A's just never put things together, and that's one thing, is that we're in an era now where your stadium means almost as much as what you put on the field.
Right.
And fans want, all the comforts that you get, and the luxury boxes, which generate a lot of money, and Oakland doesn't have it. And, the city of Oakland has made mistakes, and they haven't done everything perfectly. But I think the ownership is just an embarrassment to baseball itself. And if they could ever sell, I don't like the city of Las Vegas bailing out the ownership of the A's when the ownership has made a lot of mistakes too.
Right.
Major League Baseball, if they had more guts, should have made the ownership sell and keep the team in Oakland, rather than say, you get to go to Vegas and, it's all good. We'll just pretend that's the way it was always supposed to be.
And it's not like they're losing close games. I mean, I think their plus minus as far as runs is like 230 runs. So you take 230 runs over what, 80? They're losing by an average of 3 runs a game, which is not very good.
No, it's sad. It's sad to see something beaten to death in front of you over 162.
And a team with a great tradition, too.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, what a lot of people don't realize is that the A's were the first team in the Bay Area to win a world championship.
Okay.
72, 73, 74. You know, and that was before the Warriors, before the 49ers, before the Giants, and let's not talk about the Sharks. So you know, it's when people think about the great championships, it all started with the A's and the Raiders, and neither one of those are now anywhere near San Francisco or Oakland or the Bay Area. So.
Right.
Anyway, we're already past an hour. You know, I could talk to you another hour about baseball. Maybe we'll have you back on the show, you know, around the end of the season so that you can wrap up your Yankees, you know, analysis. And you know, it's always great to see you. And happy birthday to you. And
thank you.
Really appreciate you being able to do the show. It's always fun to have you.
My pleasure.
Do you want to give you want to give a promo for Dan and Benny in the Ring?
Yeah, why not? So we are up to episode number, I think Tuesday will be 131, which I think is pretty darn good. I think Dan
We're
is always...
171, my friend.
Wow, nice.
Show 171.
Yeah, we recently, and I think you guys were on the charts very recently, in the United States. We were up to number 8 in Ireland, which, I mean, you got Sebastiano and Scala. How do you get to be that? I guess the Irish people like us for
yes,
some reason.
the Italian-Irish connection.
But you know what? When I started doing this, I mean, our very first guest was Dominic DeNucci, and you know, over the course of the last 2.5 years, you know, I've had Dominic DeNucci, Ivan Putski, Ken Patera, you know, Jimmy Valiant a couple of times, Rip Rogers, Bill Dundee. A lot of these people are people that when I was a kid, I watched them on TV on Saturday mornings just to be able to chat with these guys and interview them is absolutely surreal, and I'll never lose that feeling. So I love it. I do.
And then when you run out of guests, you have this loser named Buddy Sotelo.
Once in a while.
When you really hit the absolute bottom, and you were going to interview the doorman or the guy that gave you the
when Jumpin' Jeff Farmer cancels.
There you go. There's always Buddy Sotelo.
Right.
Anyway, it's great to have you. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be in touch again really soon. Have a great one. See everyone next week.
Take care.
Good night, everyone.